This is Christian Farmer with Starbucks Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Friday, the 5th of December. Happy Friday, everybody, and happy first week of December over as well. I will review today's performance, talk a little bit about what was trending or what some thematic plays that we have out there, as well as also talk about the week's performance, provided that I remember to do all those things. But yes, I do want to get to this week's performance. So for the day, very quiet afternoon. SPY up 0.2 of a percentage point. Q's up 0.4. Small caps down 0.4. They finally took a little bit of a breather. They had been outperforming for the majority of the week. Same thing with those micro caps, which are down 0.6 of a percentage point. Bonds continue to sell off this week. Look at crypto, by the way. That's right here. I'll put this in here so that you can see the screen a little bit better. But Bitcoin was down 3.5%. I keep hearing about this phrase called liquidations. Yes, that does happen in the crypto world because if you're on leverage, they don't call you to satisfy a margin call. They just liquidate what they need to do. But what I'm referring to in terms of that word or term liquidations is I'm just surprised that there's still that much leverage in the system with the cryptos. I don't know who has the money to keep going on margin and then only to get liquidated, like a week later. But hey, it is what it is. But very interesting. By the way, I do not have margin data for the equity market. I'm very curious to see what that is, but don't have any new margin data since August 31st. I don't know if if that's because of the government shutdown. That seems odd to me, but it is what it is. I would be very interested to know if we're still at very high margin balances at this point. Let's move on here. Gold, silver, they were up for a good portion of the day. You can see gold actually finished a little bit in the red. And maybe gold getting a little bit tired at this point. The dollar not big, not too much of a move. And the VIX, although we're down back into the 15 handle, believe that, all the way down into the 15 handle for the VIX, pretty crazy. Areas that outperformed today, the communication stocks. Reminder that Google, Netflix, and Meta are in that XLC ETF. That was your second best performer over the day. Software had a big day today. Big move by some names like Salesforce, Adobe, and a few others that are in downtrends that are basically just kind of coming up or bouncing in a downtrend. Retail continues to be very strong. We'll talk a little bit about that sector and about what's going on, what's bringing that performance up. And China was up overnight, and KWEB was up 1.2%. Some areas that underperformed, again, gold and silver miners gave back some of those gains from earlier on. This was very much, I thought today, like a big commodity move today, and it's been that way. Commodities have been strong. Nat Gas at one point was up like 7%. I think it finished up around 5% for the day. But really, to me, that's where there's been a lot of trending areas of the market. Not only what's going on in the nat gas market, but also copper. And as I mentioned, the precious metals. All right, so let's dig into. Let's make this. I don't want to make this video long for you, but I want to make this. I want to get through a couple things to watch for next week. Here's where we are in terms of SPY. We really didn't do much for the week in SPY, and again, you kind of just have to put things into perspective. I think SPY was up like 4% last week for the holiday shortened week, and this week it was just we maintained the breakout, but you could see just not a lot of momentum. We had some movement a couple times this week, but for the overall week, SPY finished up about 0.3 of a percentage point. So a couple of days were pretty choppy. The Qs actually fared better this week. They were up about 1% for the week, and still staying above the 5-day moving average, as well as 619.94. And then IWM, as I mentioned, took a little bit of a breather. Interesting. We'll see how this if this carries next week. But you could see we made a new high yesterday, as I went over in yesterday's video. Just weren't able to kind of break that. So we'll see how this level kind of comes into play, which is right around like 251. Let's call it 252. That's really going to be the level to watch in small caps. But this has been a heck of a move from those lows, went from underperforming to outperforming because SPY and Qs have not made a new 52-week high. Small caps were the only one to do that this week. Let's look at a couple other charts here too while it's the end of the week. But here's the diamonds chart. They also got close to those previous highs, but not quite right there. RSP, I don't think that that's a new high, but close. And you could see we trailed off from breaking out to a new high. So I mentioned a couple different things. I mentioned the commodity space and the copper space. Here's Nat Gas futures. We'll kind of see how this candle developed for the day. Again, did not finish on the highs of the session, but you're looking at this. This is probably one of your best performing commodities over the last month. I think it's up 24% over the last month. Where is this going? And I tweeted this out a couple of weeks ago, and it's a large move, but another 22% higher. That's the major resistance that I see in Nat Gas. Copper, we'll look at just copper futures. Again, big week for copper, up 1.7%. I'm looking at the futures here. I know when you look at forward contracts, it might be a little bit different looking. I've heard you will note that copper, not futures, but actual copper is making a new all-time high. So just a little bit different there with the slippage, I think, in the futures contracts. That's copper. Let's go over a couple other charts too, because again, I think this is really where there's been some momentum. As I mentioned, that gold lost kind of the upside move, still above the value area for the month. I would watch 385, and here's SLV, which was up a couple percentage points, and it still finished up 2.3%. It just kind of failed to take that next leg higher. For next week, I think the main thing is going to be this, and then we'll talk about a few other groups and some single stocks. By the way, we should get an S&P announcement pretty soon if they're going to be adding names into the S&P 500. That usually comes around like 5 o'clock ish on the Friday, which is 2 weeks before quadruple witching or the index rebalance. The reminder that in a couple of weeks, S&P and the Qs will rebalance all of their benchmark weights back to equally weight. I'm sorry, not back to equally weight, back to their benchmark. They will do rebalances back to their benchmark weights. So if it's market cap, back to what the original structure is. Remember, what the variable that floats around that changes from quarter to quarter is price. So specifically, like in an equally weighted index, the names that become the largest are the ones that have gone up between the last time that the index provider struck the basket, which is in this case back in September. So you'll note that some things will get larger weights. Like, so you can look at any equally weighted ETF, for example. Sorry, not to go off the beaten path here, but for example, if you look at the equally weighted ETF, which I want to talk about that. So let's bring this up. So you could see, for example, like Victoria's Secret, Real, Kohl's, Macy's, American Eagle. These are now the largest weights. Now they're only, if you can't, sorry if you can't see this, but the highest weight in this index is only 2.2%. Right, looking at this line here too. So it doesn't skew things that much, but this is going to be a higher weight than like what the average weight in the basket is, which is about like 1.2%. So again, that variable that floats, that changes, is price. And Victoria's Secret, uh, Real, Macy's, these are names that had good earnings and popped. They go up, they become a higher weight, and then what the index provider will do in a couple of weeks is foot them back. So anyway, just thought that was very interesting. But yes, let's talk a little bit about the retail sector, because I think that's one of the themes that's going on. They just talked a little bit about it on CNBC, but you've got a lot of these discount retailers doing this, and or specialty retail. And I think of specialty retail like things like Urban, which popped on earnings. Maybe Macy's. You can see Macy's is at 52-week high. I actually like the gap here. It's pulling back a little bit. Nice little pullback here. But Walmart is another one. Shame on me. I sold Walmart. I was thinking that the market would do this and it kind of just stalled in here and didn't do much. And I did re-add it after earnings, but I sold it only about halfway up. But there you go. This is what the market likes right now. Some of these discounts. So that's one of the themes that I think is going on right now in this market. We had really nice performance this week by the banks. Goldman broke out to a new high, so nice to see this. That's generally pretty good, I would say. Morgan Stanley broke out. Um, we're talking about Citigroup. Citigroup is at a new high, so this is just nice performance to see this. These financials were pretty dormant for a while. J.P. Morgan. It's funny, J.P. Morgan's not there yet, but Wells Fargo also nice move there and out to new highs. So a very good week for financials, and it's tough to really get bearish about the market when you've got the financials breaking out. I'm going to come back to I mentioned Fed Fund futures, so I'm going to kind of end with that. But I did want to go over the week's performance. Clearly yesterday a lot of growth names got going. Uranium finished up 5.8% for the week. Oil services, although it kind of stalled out today, was also one of your best. Energy has been on fire. OIH was up 5.7%. Quantum and semis, there's a lot of overlap in these ETFs. Both were up about 4%. Transports also charging higher, rolling higher, 3.9%. And metals and mining tech also did pretty well for the week, up 2.4. So a couple other things I'm going to just talk about in terms of sectors. Software, right? So Salesforce made a really big move, getting back to the 200-day moving average. Is this a bounce? It depends. Adobe made a big move too. Some of these stocks, yes, I think they're kind of a bounce and a downtrend. Anything could bounce, by the way. Anything could go up on any given day. But I think Adobe's in a pretty well-defined downtrend. Now, that said, it could possibly rally a couple more days before it gets to the 200-day moving average. But it just kind of goes to show you that these stocks are pretty unloved. Also, if you want to look at the IGV versus so the software stocks versus your semiconductors, notice what the underperformance has been since May. The software group has been drastically underperforming semiconductors. So they're probably due for a bounce, which they started to get the last couple days. And that's just kind of the situation. And notice how far this could rally up, like before it gets to the 200-day moving average. So software could definitely catch up a little bit. I still like the stronger software names. Pega, Frog is one, also making new highs. I would rather stick with the ones that are going from the left to the upper right. I would stick with the ones that are outperforming, but that's just me and that's my style. I mentioned. So, what do I want to cover? Anything else here? Maybe just oil. What oil services did. Again, a little bit of a stall there. 313.33, some resistance. I traded one of the stocks that I traded this week was Antero Resources. Again, notice how it gave back those gains. I did take some profits at 38 today, just to be responsible. And hence, you don't want to, my opinion, like some of these names that are areas that have been in downtrends, you got to be very careful about where you're taking them off. Right, something either in a downtrend or in a sideways market will continue to do just that. They'll stay in a range for longer than you think, or they'll stay in a downtrend for longer than you think. What is there anything else that I wanted to go over in terms of sectors? That's probably it. I'm going to bring this Bloomberg screen right back up. Again, I'm sorry to kind of think that this is the situation, that how important next week is going to be, but I think this is kind of the story. The market, I think, can continue to rally or have a Santa Claus rally. Reminders: the Santa Claus rally is not now; it's December 24th to the end of the year. It's just 5 trading days, but it's really going to be, number one, they're going to most likely cut interest rates next week. The Fed Fund futures are implying a 95% chance. And then number two, um, we probably want to hear something dovish come out of Jay Powell, right? If he's hawkish, right, this market's not going to like that. And you might see, some retracement of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. If he does not come out and he's says that, that a rate cut is in the cards for the next Fed meeting. Now, I know that we're going to get a new Fed chairman come May, but that's quite a distance away. The market could do a lot of different things from now till then. So I think that is going to be important next Wednesday. We're going to need to hear dovish, because that's what really got the market to go, going back 2 Fridays ago, was what I refer to as the Williams pivot. Right at that time, Fed fund futures were only implying 30% chance of a cut, and he completely changed the market around, as well as a few other Fed speakers that got talking. So I'll leave it there, guys. Have a wonderful weekend. If you like these videos, please just do me a favor and like and retweet. And I appreciate that very much. I really want to make these videos like the best videos at the end of the day. Same thing with the note that I send out in Substack. I try to make that as the best midday note out there. Check it out if you're not already doing so.